Welcome, everybody. I'm Heather Sabin from Monona Terrace, and I'm joined by Josh Johnson. Our speaker will be with us in just a minute. We're so glad you are here with us today. I want to extend a warm welcome to you from Madison, Wisconsin. It would have been slightly a warmer welcome yesterday. We were at 50 degrees. Today we're at about 32. So there you go. That's late winter in Wisconsin. If you've been with us for previous lectures, welcome back. But if you're joining us for the first time, we're so glad that you're with us. And if you remember, those of you regular attendees of the program who cast your memory back a year ago, you know that this is the time when we engage in our partnership with AIA Wisconsin. And we're pleased to announce that this is the first of a series of lectures that comes to us from their sponsorship. This organization has been a valued partner with us for many years. And so the lens will shift from Frank Lloyd Wright related topics more towards contemporary architects of our time. And they are making exceptional contributions to the built environment. And so we are really thrilled for these next few lectures, which should take us through early May or so. So welcome aboard. We'd like to remind you all that we do use Q&A as our communication tool on Zoom. So no chat. If you have a need to communicate with us, please use Q&A, but then of course also use it to ask questions of the speaker. And we will have a few minutes after the talk today to do Q&A with Andrew. This program is being recorded. And if you must leave us early or you want to watch this again because it's so fantastic, go to mononaterrace.com and then go to the Right Design Series page. You'll find the recordings there. You can always email me if you need more information. And so now our program, and you'll notice that there's an additional face on the screen besides the speaker and myself. And this is Josh Johnson from Madison. He is a senior architect at ADCI. And that's a firm celebrating 35 years in existence with offices in Lake Delton and Madison. His volunteer work for the AIA over the last 30 years, that is the American Institute of Architects, has been very robust, and we have appreciated all he's done for Monona Terrace. He has programmed 100 lectures for the Right Design Series. And he's also worked with our elementary students here in Dane County with a program we do called Terrace Town, and that has to do with teaching kids both city planning and architecture, and they design and construct their own cities. He's been very involved in that program. So I want to thank Josh today for sponsorship of AIAW and turn it over to him.
Thank you, Heather, very much. It's always wonderful to work with you guys. And I'd like to thank the Southwest chapter of the AIA for really stepping up to sponsor this and insisting we sponsor it for the last 22 years since the inception. And it's a joy to work with you. Andrew, we've tried to get together many times with you, and we are always at the wrong time of year. We're usually right at when you guys are at the end of your years when we have our conference. And we wanted to talk to you forever. The work is absolutely fabulous. Andrew is originally from the UK. You'll be able to tell quickly after he speaks, but with a small Alabama accent added to it. But he is well regarded in the world of architecture and education to a huge degree. He's a Loeb Fellow at Harvard, elected to the National Academy of Design, was given the President's Award from the Architectural League of New York. He also he graduated from the AA, the Architectural Association in London, and that's something that always perks up architects' ears around the world because it's one of the premier schools on the planet, and for the last 75 years, it's kind of been responsible for a heavy portion of the thoughts in architecture that are out there that are interesting. So, Andrew, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but we did have Sam Mockbee here in 1998, thanks to member Mark Cruiser. He was chairman of the committee for the convention that year, and we had Mr. Mockbee speak, and it was absolutely wonderful, of course. But we've seen the changes over time since his untimely death and your work, and it's absolutely been a joy to see you continue to work, thrive, and I would say become really a powerhouse in the world of architecture design, straight up, as well as having a wonderful mission that you have. So without any further ado, I'd just like to thank you, Andrew, for being here, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you. My goodness. Y'all can definitely hear me, yes? You can hear me, Monona, yes?
Yes.
Okay, it's good. All right. I'm honored to be here. Monona and Heather and Josh, obviously, thank you for the invitation. I didn't realize I was the first one in the series, so I guess it's either all uphill from now or all downhill from this one. I'm also trying to do my bit for Wisconsin as well by wearing red today, although around here you wear it so you don't get shot at. Or if people are trying to shoot you. You were mentioning that Mockbee lectured in 95, I think, or 98. Yeah, 98. So that was about 5 years in. I think I showed up 4 years on, and I worked for with Sambo for a couple of years, and that was an extraordinary experience. I never really meant to end up in Hale County in the middle of nowhere. In fact, my parents are always wanting to know when I'm going to get a proper job. But I have been here for over something like 22 years. The program's it's going to have its 30th anniversary next year. And so I hope today I can illuminate some of our process. And capture some of the complexity of it and the delight of it. I'm sure some of you have seen the work in the magazines, but it's obviously always more complicated than how it all looks, no hands in the magazines. I think to just say a few things, just so you all know, the work that you're going to see today is all fundamentally produced by students between the ages of 18 and 23 years old. All the work, all the bricks and mortar is paid for by soft money. So we're out there kind of shaking the tin, getting grants, fundraising all the time for at least seed money for a lot of the projects. And I think if we've been of any use in this place at all, it's because I think we've sort of become the town architect or the county architect. We have been here 29 years, and I think we've stayed in one place. We're not a helicopter program. We've started to kind of figure out who to work with and who to assist. We don't bring projects to the table. We want all the projects that we do to come from inside, to have support from inside. So we're not telling people how to live our lives. We're just simply trying to support folks that are trying to do good work. And I think we always say that the work that we do is kind of born of necessity, and we're able to, in the luxurious position of being state employees, because ours is a state school of architecture, we're not ambulance chasing for our organization. I'm paid by the state university, so we don't have to do projects. In fact, a lot of the time we'll say to folks, that's not a good idea to do that. How about you do it differently, or how about you doing it over there? And I think we're really doing work that nobody else is doing. If somebody else was doing it, we wouldn't be doing it. So, but I think the other thing that it asks us to do, and we've got somewhere in the region of 250 projects in a 25-mile radius. So you really have to take responsibility for your work. It's an extraordinary position as an architect and as a teacher to have so much work around you. We always laugh that we don't really, our library never survives because the students always steal all the books, but we don't need a library because we've got a library of buildings, and we've got a library of how you touch the ground, how you reach to the sky, how you do an eave detail, and we're pretty brutal on ourselves as to what works and what doesn't work. So, and with it all being so close, if you generally, if you do well, you don't hear about it, but if you do if you screw up, you really hear about it. So so how do we do this work? Well, I think I just, to one myth to explode is that locally there's actually no building, there's no police, there's no money to police the building permits locally. So we have walked a fine line, particularly back in our history, but we're actually working to IBC. We have a plethora of consultants from all over the US and in fact, the world, and they're all working to IBC. So for us, it's a kind of moral responsibility that we sort of take to make sure that we're building appropriately. We're not trying to cut corners, and of course, all our consultants work at IBC. I think the other thing we ask our students is to just leave Hale County a little bit better than they found it. So I would say I hope today's talk offers up a sort of a positive critique of how we teach and procure and make architecture. I think some of the things these students are doing is remarkable. So they're kind of practicing what they will practice. And I think it does challenge the kind of classic professor across the table dialogue that normally takes place at school. So and I hope this afternoon I keep you all awake. You all are hopefully able to digest your lunch and not laughing too heartily at my jokes. But I hope I kind of communicate the kind of pure, unadulterated joy in creating and designing and making, because this is a fundamentally extraordinary place of a can-do place. And I hope it also kind of puts, there's so many negative stories come out of Alabama and this part of the world that I hope this is seen as a positive story. And I was saying to Monona before that I hate these things because I have to laugh at my own jokes, but I do laugh at my own jokes, and I'll try to keep it clean for you all because it's being recorded. So that's one of the problems. So without further ado, I'll stop rattling on. But I'm actually about a quarter of a mile down the road from these two buildings. This is downtown Newbern, town of 178 people in West Alabama, and I live here. And I find it a beautiful place. This is a Tim Hursley photograph from probably around the end of the last century. I always like to call it the end of the last century, but probably late 90s. Quick geography lesson. I'm speaking to you today from the kind of where the star is, at the kind of the southwest tail of the Appalachian mountain range. And what's important about that is that we're situated in a region known as the Black Belt, which is obviously originally named for the beautiful fertile black soil. And we're in the heart of the civil rights triangle of Selma, Montgomery, and Birmingham. And I think, to be honest, we live with that history every day. But we actually live, and our program is 3 hours west of the Auburn University campus, which is in the east part of the state. So we live with this very recent history every day. Only this last weekend, I was walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So it's it's there, and a lot of this stuff was neighbor on neighbor. So it's an interesting kind of tension that exists around us. Before I go further, I would like to make a quick shout out for the rural. There is a kind of common misconception that the rural is broken or dying, but if you according to the U.S. Census, the rural population has actually remained relatively stable for the last 120 years at about 60 to 70 million, and that's a country about the size of Italy. So we would argue it's not dying, it's not broke, and it's actually it's really thriving. Our home of Hale County is considered to be consistently impoverished, which is a USDA designation for which means that 20% or more of residents of a given county have lived in persistent poverty for 30 years or more. Now, I think those poverty levels obviously change when you look at the different ethnic groups and ages of folks, but just for the kind of purposes of this, nationally, of the kind of 400 or so persistently impoverished counties in the US, over 85% of these are rural conditions. And this is not by accident. And obviously they're all kind of geographically, culturally, and geologically distinct from each other. But, you know, historically, they're also landscapes of extraction. So you look at the Colonias, you look at the Delta, and you look at where I am, which is the Black Belt in Hale County. They're historically landscapes of extraction where material resources like oil, coal, iron, minerals, and in our case, cotton, have been taken out of the ground through really uncompensated human labor with no resources put back. So I think you know, that for me, I sit here as I hope a champion of the rural and a desire to kind of have a more symbiotic relationship between the urban and the rural. These things have to be considered together, not just as kind of bread baskets for the city. So shockingly, if you go to our neighboring Perry County, where the beautiful Coretta Scott King was born, child poverty rate in that county is about 75%, which just is, you know, for me as a European, is shocking to come to a place that, you know, like the United States of America. So, and then on top of that, this interestingly is a screenshot showing details of my expensive single source satellite internet service, and which most folks around here can't afford, but it proudly states that my service is 1,141% slower than the national average. So I ask you all as an audience sitting here, how can we aspire to an equal and connected society if 60 million rural Americans can't connect to it? And I think, frankly, these are vibrant places to live, and, you know, the greatest desire here is to have access to resources that y'all have in cities. So enough of my rant. So, you know, to the rural studio, this is what we look like. You know, young and full of wind and piss, and wanting to, you know, change the world, and a few grey-haired folks like myself trying to direct them and make sure they don't screw up too much. We have 2 programs. We take third-year undergraduates and fifth-year undergraduates. The third years are typically designing a small house that they do over 2 or 3 semesters. They're out here for a single semester, and then the fifth years do the kind of the more heroic projects and the kind of community projects that can actually last up to 2 and 3 years, where they commit to staying long after their 9 months of education were out here. So there's a lot of volunteerism takes place out here, not only my volunteerism, but student volunteerism. And it's very much a place where we've decided to work together to learn from each other, and that hands-on is important. So learning by doing is extremely important to us as this part of education, but also working in teams. So this is downtown Newbern. On the left is a School of Architecture. There's, like to say, there's 3 fragile institutions. On the left, the School of Architecture, in the middle, the post office, and on the right, the Newbern Mercantile. This is inside the School of Architecture. I always like to say it's a very clear, it allows students to clearly understand environmental systems. In this case, in winter, you put clothes on, and in summer, you take your clothes off. But our building is right in the center, the heart of downtown. We're deliberately taking ourselves out the ivory tower to kind of engage with folks so that they demystify their education and what we're up to and become part of our culture and our programming. This is, we do a Halloween review once a year where we we dress up with costumes and we carve pumpkins and we have local kids involved and we have contests. And this is, Toy Story walking down Main Street, which is an interesting sight once a year. And we all dress up, and then in the morning and in the afternoon, we review very serious architecture work. And in this case, there's 3 people dressed as toilets talking about a 20K house. So the point being is that we take the work really seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And that, I think, is important. That's an important ethos of the place. The rest of downtown, the Mercantile and the post office has just been reduced to 4 inconvenient hours a day, I think with the intention to kill it, but we always try to support it. We're a big believer in snail mail. And these are places where you get, in these communities, there's not a post office, another post office for 10 miles and not a gas station for 10 miles. So it's places where you have chance interactions and get to meet people. This is the Mercantile, where you can buy orange juice and Colt 45 and gasoline. Again, only place for 10 miles, but GB closed down after 39 years and 10 months. And I think we were really worried that it was going to die, but thankfully some local young folks have taken it over and are doing short order cooking. So it's actually started to thrive. So we're delighted about that. But it's so important in these communities to have the village store and the village post office. So I was just talking earlier, we're very much in Tornado Alley. We 2 weeks ago, this community got hit pretty hard. So we're very much aware of the weather. Making a living is extremely difficult here. A lot of people will drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to service sector jobs in Tuscaloosa or Birmingham. We do farm the land. It's very much today's beef and catfish. We discovered the farmers discovered that if you dug a hole and you fill it full of water and super saturate the perimeter, that it makes a pretty fast and affordable fish pond. So they fill them full of catfish. So if you're eating catfish in Wisconsin, it may well have come from my hood. And yeah, it's that beautiful black dirt has actually been washed away and farmed away by monocultivation of cotton. What's left is this expansive clay, which is also hopeless to building because of its expansive nature. But again, they're inventive. They realize that they cannot be monoculture, that they have to diversify. So trying to scratch a living. We're also surrounded by amazing works of architecture that were created obviously under dubious circumstances when this place was one of the wealthiest places in the world off the back of slavery. But all of these buildings are built of wood. They all sit today, and they're remarkable essays, not only in construction and longevity, but environmental understanding. Great porches, tall ceilings, cross ventilation, transom windows, you name it. They nailed it, and they all managed to survive without air conditioning. So a lot to learn from those. And also, of course, the kind of vernacular farm buildings, which are just delightful, like this one on an old plantation, the real evidence of African carpentry here with the central entrance, but, very clear essay in how to protect the foundations of a building. And this building has sat here for, almost 200 years. So our work is all in about, a 15-mile radius of Newbern, serve across 4 counties. The first house we ever did was probably the best house we did. This is the straw bale house under my predecessor, beautiful, great southern porch with the shame of this is that I said 2 weeks ago we had tornadoes came through. We're actually literally going out there tomorrow to put a new roof on this because it really got torn up. So and our early days were very much this sort of quite idiosyncratic scavenged houses from anything we could get our hands on, that were also focused very much on single families. So we call them single family charity homes, but quite idiosyncratic. And we've very much moved on from them today. But this is a house built with 75,000 hand-stacked carpet tiles, making a home for Lucy Harris and her family. Thankfully, this didn't get hit last week. And then this one was when we really started to kind of ring the bell for building out of local timber because we sit in the middle of a forest, so we really believe we should be building out of wood. This is what we call the expandable courtyard house. This was also built out of, we cut trees down and clad the entire thing in cedar siding, and the interior was built from a scavenged local barn. So again, getting back to the ethos of scavenging locally, but also using local resources. And here's Rosa Lee sitting on, looking like the queen of footwash out here, sitting on her throne on her front porch, engaging her community. So in the late 90s, when I showed up, we started to be asked to do smaller community projects. People have started to recognize us as a potential resource. Started out with little chapels and community spaces. This one was built of Chevrolet Caprice windows that were taken out of automobiles in a wrecker's yard in Chicago. They were then mounted on a frame because they already had holes drilled in them, and made this kind of beautiful fish skin that sits on top of a really lovely locally sourced rammed earth wall. And that's a little community center in Mason's Bend, again, the little place that was hit by tornado like 2 weeks ago. This one, another a small chapel. This was for a family on a private piece of property. This was 900 tires that were filled with rammed earth and then tamped and then covered in a pink concrete. It sits on this ravine, and it pokes its nose out over the ravine. So actually the pulpit and the preachers stand out here over the ravine and preach back to down the nave. But it was an extraordinary piece, all rammed earth tires, and then the kind of roof structure scavenged from a local barn. So Mockbee died in 2000s. There was some question around then of whether or not we would survive. We just kept on keeping on. And then by sort of 2004, 2005, we started to ask ourselves and realize that we were going to be around for a while, and what were the kind of longer term issues that we could start to deal with. One of them was housing, and being more both proactive, but also thinking long term and perhaps more inclusive about the housing. When I showed up in Hale County, there was still, and this is a photograph I took, there was still folks in shacks on living on dirt. This is actually Alberta Bryant, the lady for that first house in her home. And, you know, that was subsequently replaced by these trailer homes. And who's to say which is more sustainable, frankly? At least the shacks kind of fall into the ground. These things just sit there as scars on the landscape, but they're quite cynical, and they really become, you know, affordable rural housing, but, you know, for all of the reasons that you can see on the left. But the problem is that they fall, you know, these roofs decay very quickly. They're not built of particularly good materials. And so after 20 years, the money that you've put into it has basically fallen into the ground. So we said, is there a way that we could offer up a solution as an alternative to that, not to replace the brilliance conceptually of the trailer home, but what is there another solution out there for folks in a rural condition? And strategically, we kind of batted a number around that was actually to do with what we thought the poorest of the poor could afford monthly in either rent or mortgage. And that came out in 2004 to be at $100 a month, which actually equates to about a $20,000 mortgage on a 30-year ticket. What we had then asked ourselves was, could it become a small economy of house building, so building homes in the community by the community? So you had to split that money up into materials and labor, and that's tricky. So that's not a lot of money, but we started out, and the impact of that, if what we figured is if we could build these things in 3 weeks, it would have remarkable economic impact, even in a small place of 16,000 people like Hale County. Again, potentially $16 million of economic interest in a place of 16,000. So that was our challenge to ourselves. The name, kind of nickname, got out there in the world. Since then, we've essentially been building one or two of these things a year as prototypes, and questioning ourselves, watching the way people live in them. We almost felt a moral responsibility because we have this opportunity to build these houses, instead of building idiosyncratic things, start to build a series of models that then we can distribute. And so that's what we've done. I think 3 or 4 of the better ones that we like. This is Dave's, which is a shotgun house. It was not deliberately kind of local or rural vernacular, but turns out, if you're looking at the way of using, 14-foot lengths of timber, what is it that you can build that's efficient? And lo and behold, it ends up looking like a shotgun. So material efficiencies were really key to what we were trying to do. So here's the shotgun house that was for Dave. We also said, let's try not to use air conditioning in these. So tall ceilings, transom windows, good cross ventilation. And tall ceilings makes a big difference. When you go in these trailers, all the ceilings are like 7 foot or 7'6", and so they really feel like the kind of tin cans that they are. That evolved into Mac's house, which was a modified dog trot with living on one side and sleeping on the other side. So a central entrance, that's Mac sitting in his kitchen area. And then something like Joanne's, which was a square house, which we challenged ourselves to say, with the same perimeter square footage, linear footage, could we, if you do the math, and I don't understand, I'm not a mathematician, but apparently a square or a circle gets you a greater square footage than a rectangle. And so Joanne's proved to us that you could indeed get a greater square footage. And here's Joanne's house. There's Joanne sitting on the porch, and this is a view out of the living area across the porch. So started out with a lot of 2-bedroom homes. 1-bedroom homes have developed into 2-bedroom homes. The really super exciting part of this, and honestly, it's another lecture, is that Fannie Mae came to us 4 years ago. We were kind of starting to spin our wheels, but they came to us looking for products for their rural mortgages because rural housing is in such a mess. And lo and behold, they couldn't find any. So they ended up sending their 3 CEOs down to Newbern, each of them earning $2 million a year on top of their $3 trillion portfolio, because they manage all of the mortgage money in the United States. And they're here in Mustang, in Newbern Mercantile, talking to us about prototypical rural housing. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The fact that they were coming to this podunk architecture program in Newbern, Alabama for help was amazing. So long story short, over the last 4 years, we've started rolling these out. We have 4 people that have become a subsidiary of Rural Studio called the Front Porch Initiative, and we're now building these homes across the Southeast, and kind of the dream has come true. So we get feedback from those local housing providers and not-for-profits on our product line and our communication package, all helping to kind of crack the nut of affordable rural housing. So super excited with that, and really helps us become relevant because we get feedback that allows us to kind of test things on the ground. So anyway, moving on rapidly because I can talk forever. Our projects, our community projects really started to focus on the health and well-being locally, particularly kind of focused on the youth with boys and girls clubs and health and education. And one of the first projects that we did in 2004 was a new fire station in Newbern. Locally, these guys actually designed and built the firehouse. We worked with these guys on the project, and they established a fire department because houses locally were burning. What was the biggest impact of that, most interestingly, was that it was actually raising local house mortgage insurance rates. So you hit people in the pocketbook and they want to do something about it. So these folks came to us about this, and we did the first public building in Newbern for 110 years, which was this kind of celebratory firehouse. At the time was also supposed to be a town hall. but has this great southern wall made of polygal that allows the southern winter sun in to come in and make sure that these fire trucks don't freeze, because the fire trucks in a rural area actually carry water to the site. So fire trucks are not much use if they get to the site and they're frozen. So there's like direct consequences of what's going on around us leads to projects like this. And obviously, it's tough in an area if you don't have a fire department, because indeed it's true, your mortgage, your interest, the insurance rates go up, right? As a consequence of that, the fire department just went gangbusters. They needed a place for their educational programs, and the mayor came to us and said he'd really like to work with us to build a new town hall. So we then went on a ride with him and built this, the town hall in Newbern, making a kind of right side by side with the firehouse, making a new downtown kind of civic heart to Newbern. These were all built by 8x8 with 8x8 cypress logs stacked individually on top of each other like Lincoln logs. This was the major structural exercise, the one big opening. And, it's really important in a place like Newbern to have a place that's, generally folks only get together for religious purpose or sport. And, in this case, this was the kind of protest meeting at the post office been reduced to 4 hours a day. So important to have a place like this, and also important to have a place to vote so you can see democracy. We tried to kind of come up with a material that had some weight and some gravitas. So we ended up, because it had to compete with a kind of big shoulders firehouse, the big brother. And so we did it out of 8-inch by 8-inch cypress logs. The wall was supposed to shrink up by 4 inches over its height of 11 feet. So as a response to that, we put the windows on the outside and the doors on the inside. So you're always entering through the wall, you see the thickness of the wall, you can really perceive that it's made of one material and is very much of the place, because all of these cypress logs were sourced locally. So it's how do you make a kind of local architecture that peaks to the place. And so this is the council chamber looking out on Main Street in Newbern. So when democracy and the town meetings are happening, everybody can see that it's going on. These lovely ladies harassed me for about 6 years about doing a library in downtown. We have no broadband internet. They wanted to do after school programs, care for the kids after school. And these are mainly school teachers in this group, and they're a remarkable group of shit kickers. So 2013, we went on this adventure. This was the old bank building that had previously been used as a kind of ad hoc town hall. Now it was free. So we turned it into this. We stripped it out, made a grand reading room. All of these projects that you see now are designed and built by teams of 4 students. This was a great reading room. Then we made these kind of special little rooms on the north side, looking out onto a courtyard. And we made the courtyard out of the bricks that formed the bank vault inside the building, because we had to remove the bank vault. And you can see on the right here, the bank vault door that we brought to the front to display the building's history. So that's this. I mean, you can't today. This place is extraordinary. Really changed the game for Newbern, quite frankly. Not only bringing broadband internet to the area, but after school programs and support for the unemployed, et cetera, in a place like this. We also work with remarkable people. 2 weeks before he was assassinated, Dr. King was hunted by the Ku Klux Klan in Greensboro. This lady, Teresa Burroughs, hid him in her house. Decades later, she established a small museum in her home, which is the building on the left. The community donated the building on the right, and about 2012, she came to me and she said, all us locals are dying off. We need to really give this a makeover so it can be one building, so you can control it at one point and also have self-guided tours. So we got hold of the buildings, we stripped them back to their original form. reinstigated the porch on the left. We connected the two buildings together with a walkway so that you can have one entrance. On the back, we stripped off these little extensions and extruded the buildings out using cedar clad volumes, and had one entrance, which was a very democratic entrance, this slightly sloping ramp, so that anybody can, again, metaphorically, anybody can enter this building walking up this ramp at the back. On the left is a space that allows the organization to have revolving local art exhibits, so that there's a reason to come back to this small gallery and museum. Because if you can imagine, a one-room museum is not going to get regular different attendances, so you've got to attract folks in other ways. So here's the walkway with the fritted glass. Most of the foot soldiers in Hale County were involved in the march from Selma to Montgomery. We cleaned up the interiors and found these spaces with this beautiful siding on the inside. We checked with the client that it wasn't patronizing to keep it that way, because we found them beautiful, and they said, yeah, this is beautiful, keep it and celebrate it. So this is a community room. This is the entranceway to the gallery space. And then this is that exhibit space that I was telling you, with an evolving exhibition space to kind of encourage folks to come time and time again. And here's the foot soldiers of the movement, particularly on the left. Teresa's there in the pink, cutting the ribbon on opening day. And this has become part of the Civil Rights Trail when you come down and visit Selma and Montgomery and Birmingham. Other projects, this project helped us understand that we could do larger projects over multi-phases. So we spent 4 years working with Perry County and Perry Lakes Park. This is a beautiful swamp that had been a park previously, and the community wanted to reopen it. And so we did 4 structures in this place, one a year, working off a strategic plan. This is the pavilion, because you want to do a pavilion and get a money shot, the first project, to say that the park's reopened. So this is 2 planes, one out of aluminum, one out of cedar, making this beautiful space in the forest. And these kids were asked to, the mayor was so excited about the pavilion that he asked us to do the prefabricated restrooms that they were going to buy. And so what they got was, I think, the 3 most remarkable pooping experiences in the United States of America. On the left-hand side is a long toilet, in the middle is the mound toilet, and the right is the tall toilet. So this is the view sitting on the john in the tall toilet. This is the long toilet. This is where Monona can go and sit and talk to a tree. So that's a kind of the fun one. And then this other one is the mound toilet, where you can sit and look out this horizontal slot. And if you take your gun with you, you can shoot at the deer as they run through the fire lane in the park. So we like to bring a bit of humor to these projects. More seriously, the community had asked us to do a 100-foot tall birding tower in a particular location in the park that needed a bridge to get to it across a creek. So we built this kind of Toblerone bridge. The next project was this Toblerone bridge to get across the creek. The walking surface hangs below the structure, and then the structure is held up in the air to protect it. So there's 3 sections of the Toblerone. The outer 2 sections sit on a foundation, and they cantilever and they take the weight of the inner section. And we really built the diagram. These are kind of sketches that we work through with our engineers, the sort of shop drawings that we make for communicating with our fabricators. Then it was built in the local parking lot. The geniuses that we are, we attached a trailer axle to it, and then we ran it down to the site. And that's me in white holding up the back of it, because this structure was being bounced around like crazy on the back of a pickup truck. And then we got a crane donated for the weekend, and Crane Works out of Birmingham lifted the 2 outer sections up, and then thank goodness the central section actually fit. And there it is, here it is today. Again, the structure's up in the air. you cover it, makes lots of sense, protecting it, and also become the protective surface for you to sit and fish and to walk along. And here's a father and son fishing into in the creek. That gave us access to the other side of the park, which brought us this headache of how do you get people up into the tree canopy for observation of birds. They were particularly keen in Perry County to get the dollars of the birding fraternity to come here, use the restaurants, because the birding fraternity spend an awful lot of money on their sport. So the folks in Perry County are like, yeah, let's get these folks out here. We tried to build it out of wood. Didn't really get anywhere. And then some wise guy showed up and said, why don't you get one of those disused fire towers that they're also using for, cell phone antennas, and see if you can find one of those. And I kid you not, within a week, my students had found one for $10. That produced the oh shit moment for this faculty member, because I'm like, am I really going to let people work 100 feet up in the air? Well, so the answer was, let's go and get them certified as tower erectors and deconstructors. They practiced on the tower that they got donated. They then took it down piece by piece and rebuilt it out in the park. No concrete foundations here. We did 27-foot helical anchors into the ground to take the lateral load, and installed them with a bobcat ourselves, and then bolted them to the top of the flange. And they're a super way to deal with lateral load and uplift. And here's the pavilion, the tower today, sitting right in the middle of the forest. It's a beautiful place in this kind of cypress and tupelo swamp. We did a walkway out to it that kind of dances along the ecotone. And then this is the view from the top. And this is Tim Hursley shot with his two sons, red-haired, with their posed birding tower t-shirts on at the same time. So Tim's not as stupid as he looks either. So that allowed us to understand that we could do very large projects. That previous one was 900 acres. This was 40 acres of kind of unloved sports park that had evolved very in an ad hoc manner. They had originally they had 3 ball fields, and the community came to us and said, okay, we're in this for the long ride. We want to make a really good park, and we want to start with the ball fields. And so we did 10 phases over 10 years with about $50,000 seed money. And this was a crazy adventure. These are the kind of guys that you're dealing with in this context, rough and gruff, but really amazing, committed folks to this project. So we did new graphics and signage, new entrance, a swale at the front of the park to take the water from the park, parking outside of the park because previously cars had been allowed to drive in, keep the cars out of the park. We built the ball fields first after we'd done the kind of surfaces, 6 new ball fields, bleachers. This is a restroom that captures water off the only building in the park to flush the tilt-up concrete toilets with prison toilets, lights, again, ball fields that can also be used for pee-wee football. This was a concession stand that we use, we can open and shut like a mouth. So the hydraulic mechanism actually closes onto for security, closes onto the serving table. And then Tony Hawk offered us $30,000 to, and he gives $30,000 to communities to plan a skate park. And we were able, with our flexible strategic plan, to segue into a skate park, and we actually ended up using the entire $30,000 to build the skate park. And it's a really amazing space. We call it a skate trail. We also did this, which is 3,000 barrels that were welded together, 6 points, so 18,000 welds to make this remarkable adventure playground where the kids go absolutely crazy. And then we built the Scouts, who were homeless, a new home out of thinnings from the forest, that actually tension this kind of beautiful light structure on the inside of the space. So they wanted something that was very rustic looking. Instead of kind of cladding it with rustic paper, wallpaper, we actually made the thing out of very rustic materials. Then we also did these exercise stations where Alabama Department of Health got donated 4 of these stations, and we put them out there in the forest on these platforms. So they were sitting out there in the shade. And last thing, we did these shade structures to protect the locals, because it gets very hot in Alabama, and our trees, we planted 3,000 trees, but they were going to take 10 years to get to any kind of maturity. So we made these shade structures that you can see that kind of allow very specific shade patterns on the ground. This one was the largest, I think, building we've ever done. This is half the size of a football field. These 4 guys helped this community. Interestingly, the guy 4th from the left he's the local police chief. He was chairman of the local Boys and Girls Club. Very keen to have a Boys and Girls Club to protect their kids after school, because parents were commuting a long way, and so these kids were getting into mischief at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So this was a major kind of community effort to build this building, all built out of sticks and OSB and clad in kind of conventional blue siding. So we, as I said, we've really focused on the health, well-being, and youth in our communities, but food's also a major issue out here. We are a food desert. It's extraordinary to live in a rural place where folks will drive 10 miles to Piggly Wiggly to buy prepackaged processed food. The landscape's also changing in these rural places. The industrialization of the landscape and agriculture is also changing the face of these small towns. So they're becoming very kind of sub-rural, if you like, a kind of quasi-suburban, quasi-rural, and losing a lot of their identity, which is not good for anybody, but also impacting the diet heavily. I mean, this is actually, to kind of prove the point, this is a McDonald's Happy Meal that we kept for 3 years. And after 3 years, it didn't look any different. It smelt the same. Nothing wanted to eat the French fries. So I hope McDonald's is not sponsoring AIA Wisconsin, but I'd highly recommend not feeding your kids this stuff. So, and of course, in a place like this, you look at these statistics, our region has the potential for between 60 and 100% obese by the year 2030. And we're well on the way. So we really need, this is not a problem. This is a fucking catastrophe, quite honestly. So we need to think about what we're eating and what we're feeding ourselves. So the studio started to look at itself. We were critical of our own diet, actually did a strategic plan for our property and said, let's start to grow and raise food ourselves. So today, every student that comes into the studio works on our farm. Last year, we produced 6,000 pounds of vegetables. We are now row cropping, not in raised beds, but now the students seed, cultivate, and harvest the food and eat together. So it's a big part of our community. It's a big part of the ethic and ethos of the rural studio. We also built a big greenhouse to extend the growing season. Here you can see the row cropping in the front yard. And it really sends a message. We're not trying to change the world with this, but we're helping these students, I hope, become better consumers of food and vegetables, and trying to just, again, have a small voice for the importance of locally grown organic food, of which only 1% of the food that you buy is organic. You all should know. So it's an uphill battle. And even built our own watering system. This is a column of water that you store the water underground and then pump it with a solar panel up to that height, and that actually sprinkles the raised beds in the greenhouse. The biggest impact for us locally immediately was the local town came to us and asked us to help them with a farmer's market, so we could get fresh, locally available vegetables. Me and the staff actually built these pieces that were designed to run down the road. This is me going all high tech on you now. I promise this is the only video I will show you, but it shows it moving these units down the road on a wrecking truck because the town had to kind of squat on pieces of property. So you might occasionally have to move the farmers market around, but had a big impact on our community. Folks using food stamps could buy fresh vegetables that were available. So really, again, across the community here, Black, White, and Mennonite, really important place for us. So I will shut up. Be careful what you eat. Hopefully eat vernacular, don't eat the shit on the left. And if anybody's interested in coming and visiting, we have a big celebration once a year that's called a pig roast at the end of April. And you'll come and see that the place is much more vibrant and much more interesting than it seems in my way too many wordy and way too long lecture. So thank you. That would be it. This is where it gets awkward.
Andrew, thank you so much. That was inspiring, to say the least.
Wow, great job.
We try.
I do have a few comments here from our audience, and some of them are complimentary about the beauty of your work. And somebody noted that you had some y'alls in your conversation that clearly come from your origin.
I am trying. Right? You can't take the Yorkshire peasant out of me. So.
Rob says fantastic projects, attractive designs, and novel use and reuse of building materials. His question is, do costs presented include crane and scaffolding rentals, potable water sources, sewage, septic systems, electrical service hookups, outdoor pavements?
Well, no. So when you see one of the 20K project, for example, the house project, that started out as a nickname for that house in the studio. It then got out into, common culture, and you can imagine 15 years on, the struggle that we had having to introduce the project by saying we can't do this for $20,000, right? So that has been rebranded as the Front Porch Initiative. We are typically building a 1-bedroom for 30,000 in materials and a 2-bedroom for 40,000 in materials. Relative to everything else, no, it doesn't include those other things. Because the one thing that we can be in charge of is the kind of the pile of materials that you're buying, right? And even that will be different in price and value in Wisconsin to Hale County. But definitely labor, of course, is very different in Wisconsin and Hale County. So wow, where to get into it? I mean, with the Front Porch Initiative and the house project, it's very clear that the house design is a very small part of the issues of accessibility to good rural housing. The issues of mortgage, issues of land ownership, issues of procurement are just incredibly difficult. And for us, it's blown the lid off a whole bunch of issues that are way, way more difficult than just the kind of the simple design of a small house, quite frankly. We're currently involved, and you may or may not enjoy this. We're actually doing a pilot program for the entirety of Newbern, where we're testing a new wastewater system on ourselves that has the capacity to become the wastewater system for the town of Newbern and its surroundings. So like 3,000 to 4,000 people will actually end up using our headquarters as its sewage works. So this is architects become sewage managers in Hale County. But that's, I mean, and it's in response to the fact that we can do a house here, and yes, we might be aiming at $30,000 in materials for a 1-room house, but then we have to spend $15,000 in the backyard on an engineered septic mound field to deal with the sewage, because the dirt does not perk here. Septic systems really don't work, and so there are, you know, vastly different projects and different costs that you have to deal with. The house issue is a very small issue, but of course very important, because to health, I mean, it's like health first, and really to get people into good, secure housing is fundamental to our mission, but there are so many other questions that we have to deal with. So in our homes, of course, when I say $30,000 in materials, they're also being built with the labor of students. So there's free labor there. So we are all the time understanding, well, if we're building this for 30 in materials, that probably means that market value or market cost of this will be 60, 70, 80,000. So we're aiming at the just sub $100,000 market for these, which is still, you know, remarkably inexpensive for a 2-bedroom house. We just, and I didn't put them in here, but we've just done 2 houses that did used to be, I mean, we'd previously been doing our 2 bedrooms as slab on grade, 750 to 900 square feet. And we just this last 2 years started to do attic trusses. And we're now doing a house that's about 1,200 square feet and can be anything from a 1 or 2 bedroom house to a 5-bedroom house. And we do a kind of a Sears attic that's not finished out. So again, to try to make it affordable, but usable. And so they can use it. And when they get the family changes or they get the money, they can you know, to put the money into that space, into that loft space. Because I think one thing I need to make clear is rural housing is very different to urban housing. People do not buy homes here to flip them and as wealth builders. These are life builders. If you own a home here, likely you or your family will be in this home for 100+ years. And one of the things that we're battling with most recently is a lot of the houses, rural houses, started as 1 bedroom, and then they add on. And the place that they add on is always the place where the house fails. So you have to put 2 roofs together like that. Guess where it's going to leak? So the other kind of strategy that we just recently looked at was building a big shed. So we're testing pole barns, where then we can now, the homeowners, to actually build underneath the pole barn and expand. And so you put the infrastructure into the slab and in the pole barn and roof structure, and they can almost build anything underneath that they want to. They can expand, they can demolish. So housing wide, it's blowing our mind, the kind of the questions and the provocations and the opportunities. With the community projects are incredibly expensive, you know, honestly. The dollars, I mean, that Boys and Girls Club, the big blue whale that I call it, the team helped the community raise $180,000 in materials donations for that project. On the fire department, the team helped the community raise $100,000 in 2004, 2005. So we don't proclaim that these are inexpensive, that these are not inexpensive. We're not claiming they're inexpensive. Our designs are actually very expensive, but we are, as we mature, trying to look at more and more affordable ways of building that allows us to be more relevant and not just kind of running off the back of students' free labor, you know. That was a long answer to a short question.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. A couple of people were wondering about whether you've considered replicating this model of the rural studio elsewhere.
Well, there are lots of, when we started in '93, there was probably 2 or 3 design build programs across the US. Now virtually every school of architecture has one. I think this is, you know, I honestly, there are a number of academic programs that are, you know, there's a number that are in cities. Dan Rockhill in Kansas does a house every year or a small community building every year. Steve Bodain's has the Neighborhood Design Center in Seattle, Washington, where he's kind of sliding. He's working in the leftover spaces of buildings and infrastructures. So there are organizations like this. I don't think there's any of this scale. I mean, often they're either in the trenches, digging trenches, doing the kind of community aspect of it, or they're very design specific, but they're not as prolific as this, and as kind of across those lines as much as we are. But again, I think this place has gained momentum and kind of license and opportunity by just simply staying in the same place. I mean, a lot of academic programs will go off to Africa and build a clinic or an orphanage. And our question with that is, A, how do you know who to help? If you go somewhere, how the fuck do you know whether or not you're actually doing any good? And I think what we've done here is just dug our heels in, and make no mistake, we have made a lot of mistakes and a lot of screw ups, but I think we learn by doing, whether it's in the types of projects that we're doing, the opportunities that we have. I mean, I don't apologize for building a house out of carpet tiles in the beginning, because that was an opportunity. I don't know that I'd build a house out of carpet tiles today, because I worry about that. But saying that, Lucy Harris is probably the proudest person in the entire world with her house, because she knows that she's the only person that's got a unique house like that. And she feels great about that. So I'm not going to apologize for that, but would I ethically take that on 20 years on, when there are other things that we can address more holistically about, sustainable rural living in a place like this? We've got kind of bigger fish to fry, more systemic issues that we're trying to address now. And it's really because we've been here 30 years, we can start to say, these are the battles we need to fight. We need to get involved in wastewater. We need to get involved in housing prototypes, and we need to get involved in health and welfare. We're just working with a local community organization where we've actually built some multi-unit housing and just built a really beautiful courtyard to help sustain their organization that's helping the mentally impaired in our area. So there's real issues out here that's more, let's stop doing the willful. Let's look at the systems and really see if we can help, because there are not many voices out here for the kind of rural condition. And I think that's, as I said, I think it's a shame that it's not more symbiotic. I mean, we've got to stop treating these places. It's colonialism to all intents and purposes. You extract from a place that's a long way away, that's got lots of poor people. They have no voice. So they're not going to be able to say, no, this is a shit idea. So somebody's got to be a voice for that. And I think we're trying to be a little bit in our own little way. So.
A personal question, not too personal. What motivated a European man from Yorkshire to do this in rural Alabama? How did that all happen?
I came to the US. In England, you can do your, in England, in between, you have to get to be an architect, you have to get 2 degrees. So it's like similar to a degree and a master's here. In that professional, in the way that it's set up professionally, in between those 2 degrees, you actually have to go and get work experience. I was lucky enough to be offered my year out by SOM in Chicago. So that's quite a contrasted scales, of course. But I spent my year in Chicago with SOM. I then went back to England and was at the AA. And then I came back after that education, I came back to the US, and I was in Chicago teaching. And I'd started to set up my own practice in Chicago. And long story short, in 97, I think it was 98, I saw Mockbee lecture at the Graham Foundation, and I hadn't seen an architect talk about his work in the US the way that he did. And by chance, I applied for a teaching job at Auburn. I didn't really know where the hell Auburn was. I took it really for a semester just to come and see the South, because I wanted to see more of the US. And at the end of that time, Mockbee came to me and he said, would you be interested in coming out here? The joke was, he said, I've got enough money to last until Christmas. So 22 years on. And so he was a real force of nature, that guy, and it was a privilege to spend time with him. And I didn't claim to know anything about design build or the rural South, but I was prepared to just come and listen and learn. And I think he liked that. So, and I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when he died. Honestly, there weren't really anybody else, so we just kept on keeping on. So. I mean, good ideas survive, and his is a good idea, And so,
How many instructors at Rural Studio?
technically, there's just two of us for the third year and the fifth year. We have now almost what you'd call a small campus here. The university, interestingly enough, after Mockbee died, the first time the university gave it support for its operation was after he died. Before that, it was all soft money, and so it's kind of ironic. But so we, at that point, we asked for, I think, a couple of 100,000, which was obviously not enough. Unfortunately, it's the same amount today, so it doesn't get you as far. But I think we have 14 people associated with Rural Studio, from a farmer to a chef, a cook, and then we have 4 folks that are doing the Front Porch Initiative that's sponsored by Fannie Mae. So it's got traction, and it's very much big. Again, bigger issues, but we are in charge of our own facility. So it sounds like we've got a lot of people, but it's almost like, we need somebody in charge of maintenance, we need someone in charge of security, we need a bookkeeper. You need a lot of folks to actually do this shit. So
There was a related question about, do locals contribute labor or volunteer on any of these projects?
Oh yeah, no. I think with the houses, a lot of the time, our models that we do on the ground are helping elderly, so there's not much that they can contribute. But certainly, in the community projects, we're always looking for help, and we bring some seed money to the table. But everybody's got to have some skin in the game in these things. We're not interested in just dropping bombs. If the organizations are not in place, I mean, a bigger part of my job is making sure that organizations like Newbern Library, Newbern Fire Department, Boys and Girls Club have got a sound footing, because you can't just say, we'll build it and they will come. That don't work. Again, we can't tell people how to live their lives. It's got to come from within. And there's not many resources out here, so that's always a struggle. But there are always plenty of folks who are interested and have got good ideas, and so you work off their energy.
Well, one last question. I am keeping my eye on the time here for you. We need to get you along to a 2:30 appointment, but we've had a couple of people inquire about this pig roast. Is there information on a website about that?
There will be. We're actually doing a 2-day pig roast this time, because we haven't had one for a while. Likely in the evening on the Saturday, it will look like this. We blow the cost of a house on fireworks, and on the Friday, we're going to be celebrating 3 projects that were open during the pandemic, and then that evening we'll have a Pecha Kucha series that will highlight our alumni. So our alumni, it's really remarkable where they've all gone off and the different things they're doing, because we really ask them to critique their the way they want to be and what they want to do. So we always have fun with that. And there'll be a band and various things. And then on Saturday, we do a caravan tour of the current projects that are in progress. And we'll do a presentation at each of the sites. And we feed you lunch, and then we feed everybody dinner, which is pig and catfish. And then we'll have Hank Koenig and Julie Eisenberg are our graduation speakers. And then I roast the students, and then we set fire to things and have a couple of local bands. So it'll be a fun day, but it's a bit of a circus. So yeah,
Well,
I mean, folks can come visit anytime. We're happy, you know. We're sad and lonely in Hale County, but certainly I think it's the 29th and 30th of April. We're happy to have visitors. So.
Oh, you're not underselling this at all, just so you know. So you might get some people from this call to come out and visit.
If they come from Wisconsin and they're daft enough to drive that far, yeah, we'll have you. So.
And where can they find out more about it? Is that on the Rural Studio?
It will be eventually. Okay. We're still ironing out details, but it is the last weekend. It's the last weekend of April, and it's a high energy, really fun activity. So
terrific. Those of you who have inquired about how one might see a recording of this presentation, you can go to mononaterrace.com, our website, and go to the webpage for Right Design Series. You'll see all of our archived lectures there. If you have any trouble, let me know. I will send an email a day after tomorrow. Let's call a day after today, tomorrow.
I thought you promised not to distribute this.
Well, it didn't go any places I thought inappropriate, Andrew. You had behavior.
No, I was on good behavior. Otherwise, my communications officer will kick my butt. So.
And Josh, any words before we wrap up?
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was absolutely terrific. And we have had Dan Rockwell and Steve Bedanes on this series. So this is great to finish up with you. And maybe we need to go back and start again and ask them what they've been up to lately. And
that'd be great.
And we've got in the next month or so, we'll have Peter Stutchberry of New
he's
South Wales,
fantastic. Really? Yeah,
and
he's been to Rural Studio. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Tom Kundig is
wow.
Is going
you got all the rock stars there. What the hell?
Well,
did
with you, absolutely.
Oh shit! Right. Yeah, I'm the interloper in this whole thing. Yeah. All right.
Well, we thank you for being our first session of this series. It's going to be terrific, and what a marvelous presentation. You and your students are really doing some great things, and I'm ready to make the visit down there.
Right. Bring it on.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you so much, Josh, for your sponsorship. And thank you, audience, for being with us. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care.
Yeah.